Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Slaughter, Dean of the Tuck School here, and I would just like to extend my and the Tuck School's thanks and welcome to everyone that's here, especially all those who have put in many hours of organization and planning for tonight's event, and to Dartmouth President and to our own First Lady, Phil Hanlon and Gail Gentis. At the Tuck School, our mission is to prepare wise leaders to become the difference in the world of business and beyond. Central to this mission is engaging our students and faculty with the dynamic interplay among global businesses, national governments, and civil society. Around the world, people today are yearning for business leaders who can do good in addition to doing well. This is certainly true in the United States, where a large majority of Americans are wondering how, in today's 21st century global economy, America will create good jobs and a brighter tomorrow. To help answer this question, we at Tuck, through our Center for Global Business and Government, and in partnership with the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy, have been proud to invite to campus every major presidential candidate from both parties to have a forum for addressing America's economic future. We sincerely thank Senator Sanders for visiting campus to speak to these vital issues. And I would now like to turn the microphone to my friend Charlie Whelan, Senior Lecturer and Policy Fellow in the Rockefeller Center.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Charlie Whelan. I am the person who will be introducing the person who will be introducing the person who will be introducing Bernie Sanders. We're getting there, and you know what that makes you.
Yeah.
On behalf of the Rockefeller Center, I would like to thank all of you for coming to this town hall meeting to hear Senator Bernie Sanders. As you may know, our mission at the Rockefeller Center is to improve public policy through research, teaching, and public engagement. We spend all of our days working on issues like income inequality, tax policy, energy and the environment, education, and the like. These things matter, as you all well know, which is why you're here tonight. As we do this work, we continually remind ourselves that the political process is the way we get these important things done. After all, our center is named for Nelson Rockefeller, who served as governor of New York and vice president of the United States. The political process is how we make communal decisions in a democracy. In that spirit, it is a unique and wonderfully educational experience to be able to share in the political process in New Hampshire at this time of year. As a Dartmouth alumnus from the class of 1988, one of the defining experiences of my time was being here during that cycle when we had another open, exciting, and unpredictable set of primaries on both sides. It is now my privilege to introduce the New Hampshire State Director of the Bernie Sanders campaign, Julia Barnes.
Hi, everybody. How are you this evening? I love to hear that. Thank you, Professor Whelan, and thank you to our friends here at Dartmouth for having us this evening. And thank you to all of the wonderful students who took time to come out today and hear from Senator Sanders. My name is Julia Barnes, and I'm very proud to be the state director for Senator Sanders here in New Hampshire. Thank you. Bernie's campaign for the presidency has ignited the passion of students across this country as he honestly addresses the very serious issues our country faces, from wealth inequality to climate change, to fighting a corrupt campaign finance system, to standing up for the rights of women and people of color. He has taken this country by storm. Yes, he has. And I am honored to welcome you all here tonight to hear from Bernie. But first, I'd like to introduce you to a special guest from Massachusetts who has just recently endorsed for Bernie for president. Senator Paul Kirk was an assistant to Ted Kennedy in the 1970s. He served in the US Senate with Bernie, and he served as chairman of the DNC from 1985 to 1988. He has spent his life fighting for the ideals of the Democratic Party, and we are so proud and thankful to have him stand with us and support Bernie for president. So it's my pleasure to ask you to please welcome Senator Paul Kirk.
Thank you, Julia, very much. Is everybody in a good mood? Let me tell you why I'm here. This is a serious time for all Americans. And in considering the stakes in the November election, for me, the single overriding issue of all others is the state of our democracy and whether we're keeping its implicit promise to leave it better than we found it. To answer that question honestly, I had to confront certain uncomfortable truths. The first is the economic inequality of American households. It's wider and growing faster than any country in the world. Of all the private wealth in this country, 76% is owned by the top 10% of Americans, while the bottom 40% have a negative net worth. A second and closely related uncomfortable truth is that the recent campaign financed so-called rules of the game are poisoning our democracy's politics. The Citizens United case, I'm sure you're familiar with it. But what happened? It judiciously and judicially licensed outsized political power to the wealthiest among us, thus making a mockery of one person, one vote, a cherished concept of fairness and equality in any democracy. Thirdly, people's names may appear on the eligible voters lists, but if they feel effectively disenfranchised because all the power is someone else, guess what? They don't vote. And voter participation in this country is number 31 on a list of 34 developed nations, and we have to do something about that. The final truth we had to confront is the notion of public trust. Public trust means a belief that every citizen, no matter his or her station in life, has a fair shot at economic security and a reasonably equal opportunity to influence public decisions that may affect that security or their quality of life. Today, this nation's public trust in our public officials is at a sorry 26%. Make no mistake, these dots connect. And the truth is, they make the final uncomfortable truth. It is the truth that Bernie Sanders is telling the American people of all the presidential candidates all by himself. And that's that the unlimited amounts of money flooding our system is the most pernicious internal peril that this country faces as it threatens fundamental tenets of economic, political, social justice, and not least the fairness and vibrancy of our representative democracy. The new normal I've described is neither sustainable nor acceptable in the United States of America. And what is required of all Americans is an attitude of responsibility and resolve, best summed up in the firm and forthright response of Bernie Sanders, a son of Brooklyn. Enough is enough. So what we can do is respond to Bernie Sanders' challenge to all of us to share the responsibilities and the sacrifices required to restore public trust in America's democracy and to reknit the fraying fabric of our national character, and to vote accordingly. The bold and honest patriotic summons of Bernie Sanders speaks directly to me at what is the number one issue at this critical juncture in our history, and that is why I am here tonight and to urge you all to join with Bernie Sanders in the days and weeks ahead. And finally, I urge you to think about this. In contemplating in November, enlightened Democrats, Republicans, and independents will be asking themselves, to whom does this country belong? To whom will my next president be most accountable? Will it be a boastful, never-in-doubt billionaire, accountable to no one but himself for his nomination? Will it be a candidate accountable to a small group of special interest multimillionaires that bankrolled his campaign? Or will it be the Democratic nominee who demonstrated his conviction and credibility, as he always has, by matching principle with performance, and refused to play by rules that are corrupting the legitimacy of our political process. Instead, what did Bernie Sanders do? He walked the walk on the road to his party's nomination, supported by and encouraged by small contributors from millions of middle-class Americans. And mark my words on this: a representative democracy will not be restored from within the Capitol Beltway until a majority of Americans can cause their elected representatives to feel the burn. Feel the burn of a virtual grassroots political prairie fire sparked by patriotic citizens, fanning the flames of civil and civic engagement with smartphones and new techniques of social media, and igniting a popular uprising of massive voter turnout with good old-fashioned shoe leather, determined to leave this democracy better than they found it. This, I'll remind you, as President Kennedy reminded us, democracy is never a final achievement. It is a call to an untiring effort, to sacrifice and willingness to live and to die in its defense. Every generation of the Americas, he said, has shaped the new goals for democracy to suit the demands of a new age. This is our new age. These are our demands. This is our obligation. This is the challenge and goal of an authentic patriot who wears his passion for a better America on his sleeves. So for his outspoken and courageous leadership, his candid and consistent pledge to that all-American ideal, I am here tonight to join in that untiring effort. And as a former chairman of the National Democratic Party, to proudly endorse Bernie Sanders for our party's nomination for President of the United States. Thank you all.
Let me thank all of you for coming out tonight in this room, and let me thank all of the people in the overflow rooms for being out as well. It's a great turnout. Let me thank former Senator Paul Kirk of Massachusetts for his generous introduction and for his support for this candidacy. And let me thank Dartmouth College for allowing us to use this beautiful facility. You know, about 8.5 months ago, we began this campaign. And when we began, we had no money, we had no organization, we had very little name recognition around the country. Other than that, we were in pretty good shape. And not to mention, we were running against a candidate who was deemed by the media and the establishment as the inevitable nominee of the Democratic Party. Well, A lot has changed in 8.5 months. It turned out that what was considered to be inevitable may not be quite so inevitable. And when we began, the media folks and all of the pundits said, well, you're a nice guy, you comb your hair very presidentially. But you're, kind of a fringe candidate because, you're raising issues like taking on the billionaire class. Who's going to agree with that? Taking on a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. Who's going to be prepared to fight that? And maybe the most valid comment from the establishment and the media was a very serious one. And what they said is, look, in the year 2015, 2016, it's going to take an enormous amount of money to run a serious and winning national campaign. And what they said is that the only way you can raise the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that you need is to establish a super PAC and go begging millionaires and billionaires for their money. That's what contemporary American politics is about. Well, we said, you know what? We don't represent the billionaire class. We don't represent corporate America. We don't want their money. We're going to do it another way. And then we did something really, really radical. You ready for a radical concept? Instead of sitting down in mansions with billionaires, we reached out to the American people and said, if you want real change, help us in this campaign. And something happened that honestly, in a million years, I would never have predicted when we began this campaign, and that is, over the last 8.5 months, we have received 2.5 million individual contributions from over 1 million people. And what I am very proud of, other candidates go out and they do these big fancy fundraisers, and they say, wow, we took in $5 million today from 20 people, it's a great night. That's true. What I am very proud of is our average contribution is $27. We are running a campaign which is a people's campaign supported by ordinary people and funded by ordinary people. And that is exactly what the political revolution that we are fighting for is all about. What this campaign clearly is about is electing a president of the United States. And I'm here to ask for your support, but this campaign is about much more than that. Because I am the only candidate running to tell you a simple and straightforward truth. And that is that no president of the United States, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone, because the powers that be, Wall Street, corporate America, the large campaign donors, the corporate media, are so powerful that the only way we transform this country is when millions of people stand up and demand that we have a government that represents all of us and not just a handful of billionaires. On February 9th, here in New Hampshire, the eyes of the entire country will be on this small state, and in fact, a lot of the world will be watching what happens here in New Hampshire. And the very simple question is, will the people of New Hampshire stand up and demand that this country move in a very different direction? Demand that we are prepared to take on the greed and the irresponsibility of corporate America and Wall Street and the billionaires who have wreaked havoc on our people. That's what this election is about. And if the people in New Hampshire vote on February 9th to take us in a new direction, I believe we have a path toward victory to transform this country. What this campaign is about is thinking big, not small, of trying to understand where we can go, not quibbling over whether we're going to throw 1 million people off of health insurance or 5 million people off of health insurance. Our job is to understand that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, when we stand together, when we do not allow Donald Trump and the others to divide us up by nation of origin, or by our sexual genders, or by our sexual orientations, or by our religions, when we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. And what this campaign is about, and why I think we are doing as well as we are, why we have so much energy, is because we are talking about the real issues facing the American people. What we cannot do as a nation is allow the media or anybody else to determine for us what the real issues are. We have got to make that determination ourselves. So what are the issues? Let me just tick off a few. To me, I start, and Senator Kirk made this point, that there is something profoundly wrong when in this great country we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. There is something profoundly wrong and insulting to the history of this country and what we are about when the top 0.1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. There is something profoundly wrong when the 20 wealthiest people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. There is something profoundly wrong when one family, the Walton family who owns Walmart, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. And by the way, when we talk about the Walton family and when we talk about Walmart, I find it somewhat ironic that the wealthiest family in this country is also the major and largest beneficiary of welfare, the largest welfare recipient in this country. I find it rather strange that the middle class of this country has to provide Medicaid and food stamps and affordable housing to the workers at Walmart because the wealthiest family in this country refuses to pay their workers decent wages and decent benefits. So I say to the Walton family, the wealthiest family in America, get off the welfare train, start paying your workers a decent wage. But the issue is not just wealth, it is income. I think everybody knows that we have made significant progress in improving this economy in the last 7 years. When George W. Bush left office, you all remember George W. Bush. My Republican friends seem to have forgotten George W. Bush. But when he left office, you all remember that we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. 800,000 jobs a month. That we were running up a $1.4 trillion deficit, the largest deficit in the history of this country. And that, oh yes, the world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. Other than that, we were in pretty good shape when Obama came in. Have we made progress in the last 7 years? Yes, we have, and we should be proud of that. But what we should also understand, that despite the progress that we have made, the reality is that for the last 40 years under Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, the middle class of this country continues to disappear, and we have more and more income and wealth inequality. Today in Vermont, my state, today in New Hampshire, sounds like we got a few Vermonters here, huh? But in my state and in New Hampshire and all over this country, the reality is that millions and millions of people are working longer hours for lower wages. You have a situation where mom's going out to work, dad's going out to work, kids are going out to work, marriages are stressed, parents are not spending enough time, quality time with their kids. And despite the fact that in America, our people work the longest hours of any people in an industrialized country. Japanese are very hard workers. We work longer hours than the people in Japan. Despite all of that, 58% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. You want a radical idea? How about creating an economy that works for the middle class rather than a handful of billionaires? And when we talk about economics, a very important part of that discussion is the employment and unemployment situation. Now, every month, as most of you know, the government comes out with a series of reports on unemployment. And the official unemployment rate, which gets on the front pages of the papers, tells us that unemployment is 5%. But there's another report that comes out which tells us that if you include people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time, real unemployment is very close to 10%. 10%. And then there is another set of statistics that we do not discuss virtually at all. and that is we have a real tragedy in this country in terms of youth unemployment. Thank you, that's right, it is a huge issue that gets very little discussion. I asked some economists to do a study for me, and I asked them to tell me what real unemployment was for high school graduates, not dropouts, high school graduates between 17 and 20, and this is what they reported. If the kids were white, real unemployment was 33%. If they were Latino, 36%. If they were African American, 51%. Now, if anybody in this room thinks there is not a direct correlation between outrageously high youth unemployment and the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth, you would be dead wrong. So here is another radical idea, and that is that maybe, just maybe, we should be investing in education and jobs for our young people, not jails and incarceration. So here's a promise. By the end of my first term, we will not have, today we have 2.2 million Americans in jail. We are spending $80 billion locking up people in this country. At the end of my term, we will not have more people in jail than China and other countries. We're going to be investing in jobs and education. We're going to be moving toward having the best educated population in the world, not the country with more people in jail than any other country. And one of the issues that I intend to tackle vigorously if I'm elected president is the issue of institutional racism and a broken criminal justice system. What we have to do as a nation is to do our best to make sure that the conditions are there such that people do not end up in jail. What we also have got to do is to take a hard look at why it is that so many people are being arrested and being jailed. And I think that requires us to take a very hard look at the so-called war on drugs, which has caused so many problems in this country. One of the areas that concerns me very much is that for the last several decades, 20, 30 years, millions of people have been arrested for possessing marijuana. I think I know where you're coming from. Give me a second on that. And here's the reality. The reality is not everybody who gets caught with marijuana goes to jail, but people do get an arrest record. And for many people, that arrest record is a real impediment for them going out and getting a job. And let's also be clear about the racial implications of this. And that is, it turns out, according to a bunch of studies, that whites and blacks end up doing marijuana at about equal rates. But in the black community, 4 times as many people are arrested as in the white community. That is wrong. So what we have done, I have introduced legislation that takes marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. It does not It doesn't legalize marijuana, that's a state issue. But what it does do is decriminalize it from a federal perspective. Second thing, when we talk about criminal justice, it is clear to me that we need major reform in terms of how police departments around this country are functioning. I am tired of seeing, as I know many of you are tired of seeing, unarmed people being killed while being arrested by the police. That is wrong. And I do not want to see people who are in police custody end up dead. So what we have got to say, and I say this, by the way, as the former mayor of Burlington, Vermont, where I work closely with the police department. The truth is, the vast majority of police officers in this country are honest, work very, very hard in what is a very, very difficult job. But when a police officer, like any other public official, breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. And when we talk about police departments, it's important that we begin the process of demilitarizing local police departments all over this country. And that we do our best to make police departments reflect the diversity of the people in their communities. And further, after people get out of jail, we want to lower significantly the rate of recidivism in this country. The truth is that right now, people are leaving jail without jobs, without education, and we are shocked that they end up going back to the same environment that got them into jail in the first place. So what we need to do is to make sure that people have the education and the jobs and the income so that when they leave jail, they can become productive members of our society, not get back into jail again. And when we talk about our economy and the reason why so many millions of people are working such long hours, the answer is fairly obvious. And that is that wages in America are just too damn low. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. We've got to raise it to a living wage, $15 an hour over the next few years. It is not a radical socialist concept to say that somebody who works 40 hours a week should not be living in poverty. And when we talk about fair wages, I would hope that every man in this room will stand with the women and fight for pay equity for women workers. There is no rational economic reason why women today are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. That is just old-fashioned sexism. Together, we're going to end that. Here in New Hampshire, because you have the first primary in the country, you have a whole lot of candidates and a whole lot of Republican candidates who flood the state, and they give a whole lot of speeches. And if you listen closely, you will hear some of the Republican candidates talking about family values. You ever hear them? They just love families. They stay up nights worrying about families. But I trust that all of you know what they mean by family values. And what they mean is that no woman in this room, in this state, in this country, should have the right to control her own body. I disagree. Now, I know I will not shock anybody here tonight to suggest that there is a lot of hypocrisy in politics. I know you're all shocked when I say this. But on this issue, I think the hypocrisy reaches a very, very high level in this sense. You have Republicans going around the country telling us how much they hate the government. They want to cut Social Security. They want to cut Medicare. They want to cut Medicare. They want to cut the EPA. They want to cut public funding for education. They hate the government. They are determined to get the government out of our lives. Except when women in this country are faced with a very difficult personal decision. At that moment, they love the government and they want the government to make that decision for that woman. That is hypocrisy. That is wrong. And when Republicans talk about family values, what they are also saying is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to marry. I disagree. And by the way, for my fellow Vermonters here, I am very proud of the role that the state of Vermont has played in that area. Now, I have 4 kids and 7 beautiful grandchildren, and my wife Jane and I very strongly believe in family values, but our values are a little bit different than my Republican colleagues. When I talk about family values, I talk about ending the international embarrassment of the United States of America being the only major country and one of the very few countries in the world that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. And let me tell you why this is such a big deal. It's a big deal because today in Vermont, New Hampshire, all over this country, women are giving birth. And that is a big deal. For those of you who are parents, it is a very big day in your lives, pretty big day in the lives of the baby. For better or worse, they are now in the world. And here's the point. And that is, if that mom is a working class woman or a lower income woman, there is a very strong likelihood that she will have to separate herself from her newborn baby in 1 week or 2 weeks and go back to work in order to earn enough income to take care of the families. That is not a family value. That is the opposite of what family values are supposed to be about. And that is why I very strongly support legislation which has some 20 sponsors in the Senate and I think 114 in the House, which says simply and straightforwardly, every family in this country will have 3 months of paid family and medical leave. When pollsters call you up and they say, hey, tell me what's on your mind, as often as not, what most people will respond is, it's the economy and jobs. Now, why is that? Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, real unemployment is close to 10%. Youth unemployment is off the charts, but it's even more than that. It's the fact that we're living in a very uncertain and volatile economy. If you are 55 years of age, you are nervous that if you go to work tomorrow, your employer may say to you, well, Joe, thanks for your 30 years of work here, but you know what? We don't need you anymore, and we're going to hire somebody half your age at half your wages. And if you are middle-class worker, maybe your boss will say, well, you know what? I don't need you 40 hours a week. I can use you 29 hours a week so I don't have to pay any health care or benefits. Or maybe you are a college graduate, a young college graduate dealing with student debt, and you can't find work commensurate with your education. Or maybe you are a high school graduate trying to stand up on your own 2 feet, trying to become an adult, trying to earn some money, but you can't find any job at all. So what I think is we need in this country a massive federal jobs program to put our people back to work. We need to be hiring teachers, not firing teachers. At a time when working families are finding it very hard to locate good quality, affordable child care, we need hundreds of thousands of well-paid, well-trained child care workers to take care of the youngest people in our country. Last year, I introduced legislation that would invest $1 trillion over 5 years to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, bridges, water systems, rail, airports, levees, dams. Right now, in many parts of this country, our infrastructure is collapsing, and investment in rebuilding it makes us stronger, more productive, and safer, and we can create 13 million good-paying jobs, and that's what I intend to do. And when we talk about a political revolution, and when we talk about the economy, it means having the courage to take on the most powerful institution in this country, an institution whose greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior has caused this country very, very serious harm, and I am talking about Wall Street. Now, all of you know that Wall Street's greed helped cause the most significant economic downturn in this country since the Great Depression. And all of you know that millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. And many of those people have yet to recover. And all of you know that Wall Street was bailed out because Congress and Wall Street said, you know, they're too big to fail. If the major financial banks go under, they're going to take half the economy with them. We have to bail them out. Well, today, turns out that 3 out of 4 of the largest financial institutions are bigger now than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. Turns out that the 6 largest financial institutions have assets equivalent to 60% of the GDP of this country. They issue 2/3 of the credit cards and 1/3 of the mortgages. It seems to me when you have huge financial institutions that are too big to fail, we've got to reestablish a 21st century Glass-Steagall legislation. And we have got to break them up. We need a financial system and a banking system whose goal is to make safe, affordable loans to small and medium-sized businesses so they can create jobs, to consumers so they can buy their homes. We do not need to continue a financial situation where Wall Street is an island unto itself, only concerned about their own profits. So this is a huge issue. But I think when you have so few institutions, so few financial institutions with so much economic and political power, we have got to have the courage to take them on and break them up. I am often asked, well, Bernie, you talk about a lot of issues. What is the most important issue? And it's impossible to really determine that because all of these issues are enormously important. But I will tell you that there is one issue which impacts every other issue. And that is that as a result of the Supreme Court's decision on Citizens United, we now have, as Senator Kirk mentioned a moment ago, we now have a campaign finance system which is corrupt and which is undermining American democracy. What the 5-4 Supreme Court decision did was to say to the wealthiest people in this country, hey, you guys, you already own much of the economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to purchase the United States government. And that is precisely what they are doing right now. The Koch brothers, who are the second wealthiest family in this country, worth about $85 billion, they and a few of their billionaire friends will be spending at least, I think probably more, but at least $900 million in this campaign to elect candidates who represent the very wealthy and the powerful. We have a situation today where super PACs all over this country are raising more money than the candidates themselves are raising. We have a situation where the Koch brothers alone will be spending more money than either the Democratic or Republican Party. When you have one family and a few of their friends spending more money than either of the two major political parties, that's not democracy, that is oligarchy, and together we have got to end that process. If elected president, no nominee of mine will get the nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court unless he or she is loud and clear in saying that one of the first orders of business for them will be to rehear Citizens United and vote to overturn that disastrous decision. Furthermore, in my view, not only should we be overturning Citizens United, we need to move toward public funding of elections. I want this country to be a vibrant democracy which does not have, as Senator Kirk mentioned, one of the lowest voter turnouts in the world, where we have one of the highest voter turnouts in the world. And if elected president, I will combat as hard as I can the effort of Republican governors and legislatures to suppress the vote. When so many of our people are already not voting, not participating in our democracy, how in God's name can these governors go out of their way to make it harder for people to participate? Our job is to make it easier, not harder. And I will tell you this, we're working on a concept, not so easy, but we're working on a concept which says simply and straightforwardly that if you are 18 years of age and you're an American citizen, you have the right to vote. End of discussion. And when we talk about the major issues facing this country, I think everybody here knows that if our economy now and in the future is going to be successful, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. And that means dealing with an absurd reality that today there are hundreds of thousands of bright and qualified young people in this country who are unable to go to college for one reason and one reason alone, and that is their families lack the funds. I believe that in the year 2016, that every public college and university in America should be tuition free. And I believe that we have got to make it easier for those young people who don't want to go to a public college or university to help them go to a private college or university. And I'll tell you why I feel so strongly about this issue. Obviously, it will make life a lot easier for people who are going to college, but it is much deeper than that. I grew up in a family whose dad came to this country at the age of 17 without any money, who had dropped out of high school in Poland, where he came from. And my mom did graduate high school. She never went to college. And in our family, as in similar families, when your parents don't go to college, you end up hanging out, and your friends are people who did not go to college. And what happens in this country is there are millions of young people, kids in the 4th grade and the 6th grade, who literally do not know people who have a college education. That's just the way it is. When we make public colleges and universities tuition free, what we are saying is to every kid in the 6th grade, what we are saying to every teacher, what we are saying to every parent, is that if those kids study hard, take school seriously, they will be able to get a college education regardless of the income of their families. That is revolutionary, and it will transform our society in many ways. But it's not just college. We got a lot of bright young people who, for a variety of reasons, are not academically inclined. They want to work with their hands. They want to become electricians or plumbers or carpenters. Enormously important work that pays a good wage. They need the training as well. And then there is another issue, which is also rather beyond comprehension in this great country, and that is there are millions of Americans, many young, but many not so young, who are struggling with the oppressive debt of student loans. And let me make a wild and crazy guess that there are one or two of those people in this room today. A couple of years ago in Burlington, I had a meeting on this issue of student debt. We brought a bunch of people together. Never forget this. Young woman whose dream it was to go to medical school and practice primary care. We have a real crisis in primary care in this country. She's now working with low-income people, exactly the kinds of physicians that we need. She graduated after college and going to medical school. She graduated $300,000 in debt. Okay. I was in Iowa giving a speech, and I mentioned that fact. The young woman came up after me, after the speech. She said, "Senator, $300,000, I went to dental school." Now we also have a crisis in terms of affordable dental care. We need a whole lot more dentists. She went to dental school. She graduated $400,000 in debt. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in Iowa, talked to a young man, guy in his late 20s, I think, married, 2 kids. He is working, he's passionate about sustainable energy, working very, very hard, not making a whole lot of money. He is paying 53% of his income back in student debt. Now, all over this country, you have people who are paying interest rates on student debt of 6, 8, 10%. What are people here paying? Did you say 18%? Is that what you said? Oh my God. All right, I mean, this is like a Vermont auction, I'm going to go around the room here. And I think 21 is going to take it. I don't know what you get other than a lot of misery, but all right, but here's the point. 21, 18%, 12%, whatever it may be. And yet you can refinance your home in New Hampshire for probably 3 or 4%. Why should you be paying 18 or 21% interest rates? What our legislation does is not only make public colleges and universities tuition free, but it also allows people with student debt to refinance at the lowest interest rates they can find, which will be a lot lower than 21%, I can tell you that. Now, Wall Street Journal and other conservative organizations, they say, well, Senator, that sounds really nice. You're going to provide free tuition at public colleges and universities. You're going to lower interest rates on student debt. It's very nice of you. You're Santa Claus. But you know what? It costs a lot of money. They're right. It's an expensive proposition, about $70 billion a year. How am I going to pay for that? I'm going to pay for it through a tax on Wall Street speculation. When Wall Street went under, they came begging to the middle class of this country and said, bail us out. Well, now it's their time to help the middle class of this country. I don't know why, but maybe that's why I don't seem to get a whole lot of support from Wall Street. But hey, what can you do? You can't be liked by everybody. When we talk about our responsibilities as human beings and as parents, and again, I've got 7 grandchildren, There is nothing more important than making certain that we leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable. Now, I am a member of the Senate Environmental Committee and the Senate Energy Committee, and in those capacities, I have talked to scientists not only throughout our country, but throughout the world. And what they are telling us loudly and clearly is the debate is over, climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, it is already causing devastating problems in the United States and around the world. And what they also tell us is if we do not get our act together in a relatively short period of time, the problems that we have today, the very serious problems, will only get much, much worse in years to come. And what they are telling us, if the status quo continues, that this planet Earth, our only planet, could be 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by the end of this century. And that means more droughts, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, and what it also means, according to the CIA, is more international conflict as people fight over limited natural resources. We have a moral responsibility to lead the world, working with China, Russia, India, and other countries in transforming this planet's energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, the fossil fuel industry and their campaign contributors may not like it, but the future of this planet is more important than their short-term profits. And that is why I have opposed the Keystone Pipeline, why I oppose the pipeline in Vermont, why I oppose the pipeline here in New Hampshire. Now, I want to just for a moment connect the dots here. A moment ago, I talked about a corrupt campaign finance system. Now I'm talking about climate change. Now, I'm on 5 committees in the Senate, and I work alongside Republicans in many, many areas. And as perhaps the most progressive member of the Senate, needless to say, my views are different than Republicans. But, I go to hearings on health issues. We're talking about Alzheimer's, you're talking about heart disease, you're talking about diseases. Republicans ask reasonable questions. They don't go attacking cancer researchers. Why is it that on this issue, there is no Republican candidate for president who is saying what virtually the entire scientific community is saying, that climate change is real and we have to transform our energy system? And this gets us back directly to campaign finance. On the day that a leading Republican, a public official, stands up and says, I've talked to the scientists, I've read the literature, climate change, very serious problem, we got to do something about it. On that day, that candidate loses his funding from the Koch brothers and the fossil fuel industry. And that is why we have to overturn the Citizens United and come up with a campaign finance system that does not allow billionaires to determine public policy. Now, what this campaign, this political revolution that we're fighting for, is about is thinking big, and it is about asking hard questions. Here's a question that I think we need to think long and hard about. How does it happen that in our great country, We are the only major nation on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. How come? Canadians do it, British do it, French do it, Scandinavia does it. Every major country on earth says health care for every man, woman, and child is a right. We don't do it. Now, the Affordable Care Act, and I'm on the committee that helped write that legislation, has done a lot of good things. It ended the obscenity of so-called pre-existing conditions. It is providing health insurance to some 17 million Americans who otherwise would not have had it. But clearly, despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, we have got to build on it and go much further. I believe that at a time when 29 million Americans have no health insurance, when many more, including people in this room, are underinsured with large deductibles and large copayments. I believe that when we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, I believe that when we spend almost 3 times more than the British, who provide health care to all their people, 50% more than the French provide health care to all their people, far more than the Canadians, who provide health care to all their people. I believe the time is now to move forward with a Medicare for all single-payer program. We are a great nation, and we have so much to be proud of. And as I mentioned earlier, my dad came from a very small town in Poland at the age of 17, crossed the ocean, didn't know English, didn't have any money, never made much money, but he was the proudest American that there was, because he understood, as millions of other people like him, immigrants who came to this country, understood what opportunities existed in this country. In my view, right now, and what this campaign is about, is essentially asking why. Why are we the only country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people? Why do we have more income and wealth inequality while we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country? Why is it that the middle class continues to disappear with people working longer hours for lower wages? Why is it that millions of people are leaving college deeply in debt, unable to buy a car, buy a home, sometimes unable to even get married? Why is it that we continue to maintain a corrupt campaign finance system that allows billionaires to buy elections? Why is it that we are not vigorously leading the world in combating climate change? My friends, I am very optimistic about this country. And I believe that, in fact, when we stand together, when we are capable and stand up and take on a billionaire class whose greed and irresponsibility is destroying our economy, when we don't let the Trumps and the others divide us up, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. We have the wealth to do it. We have the intelligence to do that. So what this campaign is about is not only for you and your parents, but it is about the children of this country and leaving them a nation whose potential we know we have not yet achieved. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, we don't have a lot of time. I'm in debate prep right now. I got to go back and do my homework. So we could take a few questions. I think we have a couple of microphones here. There's one on this side. Do we have one on this side? All right, 1, 2 mics. Raise your hand, give us your name, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Reed Sanborn. I'm from Lebanon, New Hampshire. You propose a $15 minimum wage, and
Yes.
large companies like Subway, where I work, look at that as an expenditure, and they want to keep their overhead, their gross amount of profit, and in doing so, they would want to cut labor costs. Are you going to introduce any kind of bill that would protect workers from being cut because the profit margins are being broken by a higher minimum wage?
Look, I am sick and tired, as the American people are sick and tired, of a culture of greed, which is saying today that we'll shut down in America and we'll move to China if we can make $5 more, that we are prepared to cut the wages and the health care and the pensions of workers and give CEOs huge compensation packages. So as one of the strong champions of working people in this country, you better believe that I will stand with workers if their companies are trying to lay off people. $15 an hour is a living wage. Workers in America deserve that wage.
Senator Sanders, my name is Barry Wenig. I live in Lebanon. I know that you've said that you refuse to run a negative campaign, but now another camp is starting to say things that distort your particular beliefs and your particular platform. Right. What is your plan going forward to deal with this?
You are looking at and this is pretty unusual, my friends. You're looking at a public official, a U.S. Senator, who has won elections and I've lost elections, been in a number of elections. I have never run a negative radio or television ad in my life. And it is my very strong hope that I never will. And I believe if people are distorting my record, as is the case right now, we are going to deal with it. And I have dealt with it, and we will continue to deal with it. But I believe the American people deserve campaigns which are based on the issues impacting their lives. They don't want to see candidates going around saying, I'm great and everybody else is terrible and awful. And that's not the type of campaign that I have ever run or will run. Okay. Well,
Senator Sanders?
yes. Oh, one at a time. You got a mic right there? Okay. Where's?
Over here. Go ahead. Senator Sanders,
Yeah.
my name is Steve Riley. I've recently retired, and I'm currently living on a combination of Social Security plus my 401k IRA. While I agree with everything you're saying tonight about reining in Wall Street, somewhere during George Bush's term, my 401k became a 201k. And I was just curious to get your thoughts on what you can possibly do to prevent reining in Wall Street from affecting our IRAs and 401ks.
Look, there has been, thank you, Steve, there has been an attack for decades now. And I dealt with this in Vermont when IBM tried to slash the pensions of its workers, go back on their word, and we ended up turning that around. And I've been fighting to preserve people's pensions and retirement benefits for many, many years. But this gets back to a culture that we have right now. Same question is asked over here, the culture. The culture says, I am the boss, and I will do everything that I can to make my compensation package even greater. I now make 300 times what workers make. That's not enough. I need more. And we're going to cut retirement benefits. We're going to cut wages. We're going to cut benefits. We will do everything we can to change that culture. Furthermore, on a related issue, there are some people, Republicans, who talk about cutting Social Security. I will do everything that I can to raise the cap on taxable income so we can expand Social Security benefits in this country.
Senator Sanders, thank you so
Okay,
much.
maybe you got two more questions. Yes.
I'll be quick. Gun issues,
Yep.
very much on the front of everyone's mind.
Yep.
Could you tell us how you envision cutting the gun
Great.
violence epidemic?
Thank you. Very good question on a very important issue. I would assume and hope that everyone in this room is horrified by the kind of gun violence that exists in our country and by the mass murders that we have seen so many times over the last several years, where people walk into schools. It is unthinkable. People walking into schools and killing children. It's not even, I don't like even talking about it. It's such an ugly, horrible thing to imagine. So what do we have to do? Well, let me just say a few things about my own record on this. In 1988, I ran for the United States Congress in Vermont against two opponents. And the gun people there said, well, you can vote for either one of these other guys. Don't vote for Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders believes we should ban military-style assault weapons. Okay, that's what I said way back in 1988. I lost that election by 3 percentage points, came in second. Now, I can't tell you absolutely that my position on banning assault weapons was the key point, but it may have been. I lost that election. I stood up to the gun lobby. 2 years later, I maintained my position. I won by 16 points, and I've won ever since. Now, my view is that the most important thing that we can do is to make sure that guns are not purchased or possessed by people who should not have them. And that means people who have criminal records, people who are mentally unstable. So I have fought hard and will continue to fight hard to improve and expand a provision that I have long supported and voted for, and that is the instant background check. But we've got to go beyond that. What President Obama is doing now, and what I support, is trying to deal with the so-called gun show loophole. And what that loophole is about is enabling people to buy guns by avoiding the instant background check. Sometimes they get it on the internet, sometimes at gun shows. And what the president is doing, which to me makes eminent sense, and makes eminent sense, I think, to vast majority of the people in this country, gun owners or not, is that we have to do away with that loophole. The other provision that we have to deal with is what we call the straw man situation. And that is that somebody legally goes into a store, passes the instant background check, purchases 10 guns, walks out, and then sells those guns to criminals. That should be a federal crime. And I'm pledged to make that happen. Furthermore, here's the truth, and one of the reasons I am fighting for a Medicare for All health care program is we have a whole lot of people in this country, many thousands of people, who are walking the streets who are suicidal and or homicidal. And I have gotten calls in my office, and I think other senators have as well, from frantic members of a family who are saying, I am worried, I am scared to death as to what my brother might do to himself or to somebody else. And you all know suicide is a huge problem in this country. What we need to do is revolutionize the delivery of mental health treatment in this country. What we need to do is to understand that if somebody has a mental health crisis today, they need to be treated today, not 2 months from now. So. Okay, last question over here somewhere. I gotta, where's the mic?
Over here.
Okay. Where are you?
Here's one.
Okay, yeah, ma'am.
Hi.
Good. There she is.
There are thousands of women and children, families,
Can you hold that mic a little?
fleeing and running to our borders from crime and threats and corruption from Latin American countries. And I want to know what your take is on that issue and how you plan on identifying and defining asylee applicants.
Thank you very much for asking that question. For the last 7 years, I have worked very hard with President Obama. I have supported many of his initiatives, not all. We disagree on trade policy, we have disagreed on tax policy, etc. Right now, as I think you are referring to, the Obama administration is engaged in a deportation effort against many families in this country who have fled from countries like Guatemala and Honduras. And the fear is that if these families, including kids, are returned to those countries and to communities that are literally run by drug cartels, they may be killed. So I believe that President Obama's deportation policies are wrong. I will not do what he is doing. And if the case is made that going back, forcing people to go back to their country of origin results in harm or death, they should have a right to stay in the United States. All right, there is an election here in New Hampshire on February 9th. Let's come out to vote. Let us make the political revolution. Thank you.